I want to welcome you to the first in a series of monthly webinars called Inside the Investigation. I'm Ellen Weiss. I'm a board member, and honored to be board member of FIJ. And we're really excited to launch this series for a couple of reasons. One, we obviously get to shine a light on some really terrific and impactful investigative work, and to hear from the reporters and the people behind these investigations about how they did what they did. We actually get to share concrete tips and resources that all of you and other journalists can use in your work. And we get to feature investigations that happened as a result of the fund support. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how you can apply for an FIJ grant and how we can help you. And we'll do that at the end of the webinar, and we'll give you some links that you can follow. I do want to give a special shout out to and thanks to FIJ CEO Eric Ferreira, our board chair Bill Marimo, and really the entire FIJ board for their support and their help in creating the series. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Jen and I are going to talk for about 20, 30 minutes maybe. If you have questions, you can just add them whenever they occur to you. In the Q&A. If you add them in the chat, don't worry, we'll find them there too. Also, we are recording this webinar, and if you've registered, you will get an email from us sometime next week with a link to the recording, also the tip sheet. They'll also all be available at the FIJ website. So if you don't want to take notes, it's okay. You're going to be safe. So now on to our featured guest. Zhen Wang joined Wisconsin Watch as a Fund for Investigative Journalism Fellow in January 2023. She's worked as a reporting intern there since 2021, May 2021. At University of Wisconsin in Madison, she earned a master's degree in journalism. She previously worked for The Guardian's Beijing Bureau, the China Daily. Before joining journalism, she earned a master's degree in international relations in New Zealand. But the thing you may not know about Jen is she is a self-described unprofessional diva. She has been taking voice lessons, and she is a big fan of Renee Fleming. So just to know that there's life beyond tearing down the prison labor industry in China. Just a brief description of the work, and then Jen, we're going to ask you to describe it a little bit more. But a big thing for Jen in 2023 was to focus on alleged human rights violations, both in China and in the US. And she started to look into whether a well-known brand, what's called Milwaukee Tool, whether they relied on forced Chinese prison labor to make their gloves. So the other really important thing to know is this was her very first investigative study. So then maybe you can just begin by telling us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so the story was about Milwaukee Tool sourcing Chinese forced prison labor to make some type of work gloves. Yes, so that's what I've done in the past year. That Milwaukee Tool, as it shows, the lovely picture that my colleague Jen took, that this 100-year-old Wisconsin-based company was sourcing for Chinese prison labor to make work gloves for the brand. So that's where I got started to really look into the production side, and also the supply chain of the company has.
Great. And where did this story come from? I mean, how did you even find out about it?
Yeah, no. Well, I didn't find out. It came to Wisconsin Watch as a tip. Since we're talking about where it came from, I need to give a credit to Di Hao, who was my editor at Wisconsin Watch, and as people who have no knowledge on her, not knowing about her, she has earned a reputation as a fearless and fair investigative reporter for the past 40 years in Wisconsin. She's, well connected and resourceful, and I think all of that helped earn their trust with sources. That's why I think they reached out to her in the first place.
And was this just out of curiosity, was it because Wisconsin Watch had a tip line, or was
Yes,
this, okay, so they had a way for someone to reach out to the organization to say, hey, there's a story you might be interested in.
exactly.
Got it,
Uh-huh.
got it. Um, and I guess the question I have is like, why do you think the tipster reached out? Like why,
Mm.
and how did you form that relationship?
Yeah, yeah. As I mentioned, I think the major reason for the Chippewa Ridge outreach is it's really due to the reputations that, Wisconsin Watch, the as a managing editor, has built trust with the community for years and years, for the past 40 years. And her reputation as a fearless and fair investigative reporter, people when they, want to tell the media or something, they came to her and, to see, oh, right. So is this a story need to be told? Is it something that, you want the media to expose or something like that?
So reputation and reputation,
Trust. I think
being good with sources too. Tell us, who are these people that we're looking at in this slide?
yes. So that this is, I call her Mandy. Ximin Lei, when Dee told me, this is a Chinese woman who is a newly immigrant from China, living in the Twin City areas, claiming that Milwaukee too, sourcing Chinese prisoner laborers, where her husband is incarcerated, to make some types of gloves. You need to, and I was, the best pick in the newsroom to cover the story. And I was, freshly graduated from UW Madison. I desperately need a job. So I said, yes, let's do it. But, I said yes doesn't mean that Mandy Shimin Lei trusted me in the first place. She thought I was a Chinese spy, and and she asked me, "Oh, can you replace her? Can you assign another reporter to cover the story?"
Wow, so she,
That was not a joke. I'm not making a joke. That was serious.
yeah.
Yes, right.
Wow, so she thought you were a spy. So how did you earn their trust? I mean, to go from a spy to somebody whose husband is in prison. So
Mm,
there's a lot at
yeah,
stake for this person, right?
exactly,
How did you earn their trust or her trust?
exactly. Right. So I was trying to understand her, knowing her traumatic past, before fleeing to the United States in 2021. After her husband, the photos showed on the left that Cheng Yuan, who is a human rights activist, advocate in China, was arrested on subversion charges and is still imprisoned in central China. I learned Mandy and her young kid were under house arrest for 180 days and was interrogated by authorities if Mandy was financing her husband's um, activities in the past. And I think that's and later on, I learned a little bit of Mandy herself. Her own story is that she had a very successful career. She worked in the field of e-commerce, and ironically, one of her customers is Amazon. As a result of her husband's arrest, her career was ruined. She lost her job, and their kid was denied access to education, access to school. So, you know, there was no hope for her and her kid at all. Um, and actually, Mandy and I reconnected recently. she mentioned she had a severe PTSD early on during my reporting. I guess partially that explained the reason. Once she recognized the Chinese face, she might make the link association with a spy, in fearing that I might tell something to the government and report it to the government what she was trying to do in the United States. But she also mentioned to me recently that she was very moved by the email I sent to her. So in the email, I list a couple of stories that covered for the Guardian, Beijing Bureau on the crackdown of human rights lawyers, activists in the past. And also told her I was approached by Chinese officials, who basically questions my loyalty to the country, and ask why I was doing the coverage for a foreign news media. So yeah, so I basically told her all my past experience, and I got her approval. I got a job. That's how the
Yeah.
reporting got started.
How long did it take you? Often to earn the trust of a source,
Yeah.
there can be a lot of investment of time before you even start any reporting,
Mm,
just meeting with people, and I think sharing your work with them is
mm,
really, really important. So
mm-hmm.
how long did it take before she finally said, "Sure, I'll let you interview me"?
I think it's like maybe 2 weeks.
Okay, pretty fast.
Why not 1 or 2 weeks? Yes, I think the email actually, I think worked. I worked in the way that not only she understood what I had done in the past, and also my experience with the authority was not pleasant at all. So I think because of all of those factors that earned her trust, and also I understood why she thought or had thought I was a spy in the first place. Yeah.
Great. Um, so you had one source, right?
Mm,
This was
hmm.
big allegation, right?
Yes,
How
yes,
did you go about getting other people to speak to you? And where were
yes.
those people located?
Mm, right. Wow. So this this question so jog my memories.
Hmm.
I think through her, through Mandy, I got Li Mingzhe. So Li Mingzhe, who had been, so he is a human rights activist, advocate, who had been behind bars in the prison in central China. We're talking the same prison for 5 years. I talked to him, and who basically described the working conditions, um, the hours he worked. You know, at one point he said to me he earned 48 cents a day and more than 90 hours per week. Um, simply making Milwaukee tool gloves. And also, he also told me inmates were subject to penalties if they fail to get the work done on time. So if you think about what penalties that inmates were facing, like beatings, banning from family visitations, as such. So it was devastating. I mean, it was horrible. And also, at the same time, another former inmate who made Milwaukee tool gloves also agreed to talk to me. Um, then I've got like two witnesses provided consistent accounts that they were making, as here's a photo shows some type of Milwaukee 2 branded gloves. And also, I think this big is a name of one supplier that tied to the brand. Yes, here is the picture is shows where the prison locates their living area in purple circle, and the yellow area is their production area, which is huge in the prison.
Wow, so the prison is really right on the grounds of
Mm-hmm. Production.
manufacture. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right, right.
Exactly.
These were ways for you to confirm what your source
Mm,
told you. You were sort of
mm,
building the case, you have
mm-hmm,
visual evidence, right?
mm-hmm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
just a quick question. Um, it sounds to me, I mean, that you have one source in Minnesota, but a lot of your sources were in China.
Mm-hmm.
Um, were you working in the middle of the night?
Yeah, right. I mean, that's not, I'm not exaggerating. Um, so think about the time differences. So United States is behind, I think 12 up to 14 hours, depending on, East Coast or West Coast. So usually I, I talk to them at nights, their daytime. So basically I worked at night, and talking to them, by phone or some other Zoom, something like that. Yes,
Did you
remotely.
Yeah. Did you use any secure lines? Like, did you
Mm,
use Signal or anything
yes,
that you did? Okay.
yes,
So,
yes,
because they must have been cautious about.
exactly. They were very cautious about safeties and surrounding areas, surrounding environments. So we have to sometimes reschedule our interviews. But I always keep the communication line open, and let them know when and where to find me easily.
Hmm.
So I think that make our communication easier.
Right. And how many people did you end up speaking to?
I haven't counted the exact number. I think dozens or 2 dozens,
Wow.
because some of them didn't end up, um, I mean, in the story. But I think I've talked to as many
Hmm.
sources, relevant or irrelevant, as many as possible.
Sure, sure. Just so
Hmm.
you have the authority to be able to say this is what
Yeah.
they're like.
Yes.
Hmm. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. I
Hmm.
think the other huge challenge, and we've all heard about the supply chain,
Mm,
but I had this image that as you were doing this story, you had one of those
mm,
walls,
mm.
like in Homeland, where you were trying to figure out the supply chain from this
Exactly.
particular manufacturer to Milwaukee Glove, but also to sort of Home Depot or somewhere else. So
Exactly. Yes.
did you know anything about the supply chain when you began?
No, I had no, have to be frank that I had zero knowledge on supply chain at all. But but one of the questions that occurred to me is once the two former inmates told me the name of one specific supplier, um, and I needed to figure out the relations between the supplier and Milwaukee Tool, and how those work gloves ended up selling in Home Depot, as you named, Amazon, or Walmart. I mean, here in the United States, um, and that I need to figure out how to get from point A to point B. That's where the concept, the idea of supply chain kicked in. So here is, you know, a yeah. So it is. I cropped from Milwaukee. Sorry, um, Milwaukee Tool is a subsidiary of Tectronic Industry Company Limited, a Hong Kong-based multinational company. So in order to make it mapping out, you know, from point A to point B, I really need to understand the organizational structure, what is like, what is inside this, plus the feelings to, the evidence I've got, the feelings to one Chinese financial regulators also shows the supplier was subcontract to um, you know the Milwaukee Tool's parent company. So I have to figure out what exactly relations there. And the supplier, to be specific, named Shanghai Select Safety Products, was contracted to make gloves for a subsidiary of Milwaukee Tool's parent company, which I have introduced this called Tectonic Industries Company Limited, and to make certain types of work gloves, as the filings to the Chinese financial regulators shows. And I've also obtained shipment records shows that this specific subsidiary shipped work gloves to Milwaukee Tool in the past. So, I'm trying to connect the dots and be able to connect each dot eventually. And that's where, I proved, how to get from point A to point B.
And at what point in the connecting the dots did you reach out to the company? It's often a debate
Yeah.
when you reach out to the
Mm,
person who's being, or the company that's being accused, or the
mm,
institution. So at what
mm,
point did you feel, it's time for me to reach out to Milwaukee Tool?
mm. Yes. Yes. I think that's part of the reason, because, sorry, that's part of, very important in the investigation. I was not quite confident, initially in the beginning of the investigation, without enough evidence to back it up. I either got denied by the company, where, they might ask why I'm doing this, right? So I think after I've got enough to know who made the branded gloves and how those gloves made for the laborers ended up selling in the US market, I reached out to the company, basically
Mhm.
showing what I've got and asking them to answer some specific questions. But what I've got was that the company declined to answer my questions. Instead, they issued a blanket denial to my questions.
Yeah. Oops, let me, before I do this. Yeah, I'd love to unpack a little bit more. The company, not only did they refuse to talk to you, but they said they did their own internal investigation.
Mm, mm, mm.
And sure
Mhm.
enough, they found nothing wrong.
Right.
And you know, that
Yeah.
was, they kind of ghosted you
Yeah.
after that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess in the role of a therapist, how did that make you feel?
You know, I'm glad that you're referring to a therapist, a therapy for journalists, investigative journalists. I think we need them for mental health. So, at personal level, I was furious simply because the company didn't address my questions at all. Um, but I think also, I'm a reporter, it was a turning point in the investigation. It made me think harder in the way that it prompted me to further answer the soul work part. Like, the use of forced labor in the supply chain is a problem, is a serious problem. And then how companies like Milwaukee Tool oversees its supply chain, and in what ways. Um, and if they rely on self-regulatory tools like audits, how does it work? Or how does that not work? So those are my questions that, after that, I cannot frame it as a fight. Interaction with the company, actually, those questions came to my mind. And I kept digging those questions. Um, and back to your questions about the company's position, I'm glad we are having the conversation today, because as of today, the company has made no specific response to my question. Um, and from my, point of view, that I think the company Milwaukee Tool deflects its corporate social responsibility. Um, we know that it's being under scrutiny from the Congress, from the media, from Mandy and her attorney, who are preparing for a lawsuit against them. Despite
So,
of this, yeah, sorry, yes.
well,
So despite
I was going to say the company um, was kind of ignoring you, but
exactly,
let's talk about others, because you actually had some pretty significant impact.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yes. So yeah, exactly. I think so. My reporting sparked the bipartisan congressional hearing. The co-chair wrote a letter to Milwaukee 2 and outlined a list of questions for them to answer. And also, Walmart stopped selling Milwaukee 2 branded gloves online and marketplace. But I need to give credit to Mandy. I'm not sure if she's here today or not, because I think she is so brave and initiated public campaign targeting Milwaukee Tool and its vendors. And also, she also urged retailers such as Walmart to stop selling gloves. Because of her bravery, it caught the attention of Walmart's shareholders. They brought the question to the shareholder meetings directly and required an answer from the president. So I think all of that, um, because of those, yeah, I think that's the impact of my reporting.
Right. Um, I wonder if you could just spend a minute and, as you think back, um, what do you wish you knew at the start of the
Mm,
project,
mhm,
that you now know, and things that you would tell somebody starting this kind of project, a project
mm,
that you're speaking to people who either have family members or themselves experienced prison labor, figuring out the supply chain.
mm.
Just like what did you learn?
Yeah, I think this is a very insightful question. Um, I have given some thoughts on it. Um, the takeaways out of this project. Um, I wish I've learned more about trauma-informed journalism reporting, how to talk to sources who have experienced trauma in the past, in the case that for former incarcerated prisoners who made gloves, 90 hours per week and for years and years. And also, Mandy, the wife, who also gone through traumatic past. I wish I've learned, how to talk to them in the first place. But I think I've done something right, like giving them agency to lead the conversation and, letting them review the codes if they asked me if can I see my codes, what codes have you used. I think I give them autonomy, within my capacity. And also, when I approaching them, I made it clear I'm a reporter, my expectations out of the interviews, and also keep the communication lines so that they know when where to find me. So I think I've done something right, but I could, have done reporting much better with the resources, with having learned about how to do traumatic based journalism. So which I think I've included in the tip sheets. I think the other thing is, for very complicated topics such as the global supply chain, um, I think it's easy to draw a map and update it from time to time because it helps me clear my thoughts from time to time. And knowing there are resources available, resources like my colleagues, my editors, throwing ideas to them and often and always ask feedback like, what do you think about this? And what do you think about that? And, you know, as a matter of fact, when I knew, there might be a possibility that was going to be replaced by another reporter for this project, Dee and I think Dee came up to this idea that how about you know, drop her a note telling her your possible, reporting experiences, and that way might gain her trust. So I think that always, resources and strategies available for tackling a complex topics as such. And I think working with the team collaboratively is very important. But I think it's for me, like be able to work independently, often the case. Have to watching snowfall outside of my window for most of nights in Wisconsin, and the sense of loneliness made me feel overwhelmed. But I think that's part of the job is that have to be independent to get the work done. So
Wow.
those are takeaways out of this project. And
Great.
also I'm very proud, this is my first one. And surely I have, some other projects in the future, but I'm very proud of getting the work done.
Absolutely. Well, we're gonna start incorporating some of the participants' questions. Feel free to ask. You can ask about this project. You can ask about FIJ. You can ask about investigative reporting. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was about to say this is that, so since I spoke about, available resources and there are ways to find out resources, I think of FIJ is one great example, where, I don't think I can get the job done without the support from the FIJ. So I feel very grateful for the opportunity as a diversity fellowship in-house at Wisconsin Watch.
Well, we feel very privileged to have been a part of your work. So there's one question from Brendan Duggan. Sorry, apologies in advance for any mispronunciations. Here we go. In Wisconsin, how do you learn about what your audience in Wisconsin cares about or concerned about? And do you let that lead what ideas you pitch, or do you or do you not try to let the audience data affect what you want to investigate? That is such a great question.
Yeah, it's such a great question. Um, it's a questions about if the investigations comes from the idea of our readers, whether this reader-driven investigation. I think the Wisconsin has established a tip line. It's basically a reader-driven services. If you think about anything that matters to you, where if you're seeing, someone in the harm, where you wanted to expose wrongdoings, feel free to give us, a tip, send us a tip, and we're going to investigate that. I think, I think Wisconsin Watch has been doing that. Otherwise, the how wouldn't get this tip in the first place.
Yeah, I think, I remember when I first saw this story, I was like, wow, Wisconsin Watch and China. And, here it was an international story, but it really was
Mm,
a local story. Was there anybody who was kind of like, why are we doing this story?
yeah.
Do you feel like they sort of got it? Even though I know obviously the tip came through there, but I guess the question was, did they put it through any filter where they were like, okay, you're gonna be talking to a lot of people in China. How much are we going to center this in China, and how much are we going to center it in Wisconsin?
Yeah, that's actually a good, very good question. This is an international reporting, because I talk so much about global supply chain, things like nothing to do with Wisconsin. So during the reporting process, I often get feedback from my colleagues and editors seeing that at the same time, this is a local brand, this is a local company, and hired so many local employees. Um, that's why we need a local voice as well. So that's why I included, union leaders from Wisconsin, Milwaukee, actually, and not also, Wisconsin-based investors from their point of view. How, what's their take? What's their perspective and opinions? If there's abusive labor practices in the supply chain, what does that mean to them? What is the implication to the company, for locals? I think this is really important. But I think more important is what are the facts? Are they grounded? How to verify those facts? So I think to summarize that, it's an international story, but with local, impact. And also that's why I think the local reader and audience need to know, why Milwaukee 2 has not responded to my questions as of today. I think the Milwaukee tool has owned an answer to the public and also to Mandy and her and many other prisoners to make, branded gloves for the company.
Right. And ultimately, who were the investors who actually took, I mean, it's always interesting, like you don't necessarily know where you're going to have impact, but
Yeah.
your impact, it didn't necessarily happen from the company, right? Even necessarily from the consumer. It happened from the investor. And I wonder if you could talk
Mm,
a little bit about that because
mm,
um, I, sometimes we don't think about like, if a company's got investors, they might care about something. And
mm, mm.
just curious if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yes. Well, I think here in the United States, for for big retailers such as Walmart, I think shareholders have a big say, and they deserve to know what's been going on. If the policy, set up in the company that we're against the use of forced labor in the supply chain, if it occurred, I think shareholders has a right to know what's going on and ask for an answer from the company's executives directly. I think they have the interest to know and they have the right to know. Um, I think it's interesting for me to learn that part as well. I mean, you know, the the actions of Walmart took is actually it's due to the concerns that the shareholders are having, and that lead to the actions that Walmart took.
Right. So Walmart stopped purchasing these gloves because of shareholder pressure,
Yes, yeah.
which is which is amazing, which is great.
Mhm.
Another question, how long did investigating the supply chain take? And did you need help from sources or experts, or did it all come from tools? Like what was your
Mm,
secret,
mm.
special power on that one?
Yeah, I love that because I have no idea how. I mean, how to do that. I was learning out of academic journals, like there being vast reach academic articles on this topic. I also shared in the tip sheet. Where I've learned that where the use of forced labor usually occurs, subcontractors. Um, you know, in the case of Milwaukee 2, it's most likely, and it occurred in prison, which is subcontracted to a supplier in China. And I think I've also used the tools, investigative tools, the evidence, the feelings the feelings with Chinese financial regulators, so that I, figured out what exactly the business relations between the supplier and Milwaukee Tool. I think both academic studies, which is very theoretical and it's sometimes boring, can be boring, but it's very useful. And the other thing is the tools that help me to get the evidence, to be able to connect those dots.
Got it. Got it. Um, So you said that, your editor, D. Hall, was like instrumental, but
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if you had any disagreements and how you worked through them.
Mm,
Um, as someone who's been on the editor side,
yeah.
um, there's always the moment when you're cutting something or changing something or questioning something that the reporter feels really strongly about. Sometimes it
Mm,
goes the reporter's way and sometimes not. But I wonder
mm.
if, how you worked through, if you could give us an example of any time where you're still thinking about that thing that got cut out of the story and you really think it should still be in there.
Yeah, I think a lot of times. I disagree with I disagree with her. Um, Especially, with the time she felt like, oh, the story, can be done, could be, the investigation is over. But I was still digging, into um the supply chain to prove, if the supplier is still be used by Milwaukee Tool to make its own gloves. And then at one point, I think I went undercover. I was a middleman, um, you know, played as a middleman and between, US company, and asking if the specific supplier, is still making gloves for X, Y, and Z American companies. You know, while I don't think they would agree if I, you know, came up with the crazy ideas, but I think it's necessary to prove what exactly the relationship up to the latest, and which I think the case that I I was lucky, and by the time I was asking the salesperson, the company was still making gloves for Milwaukee Tool. But of course, there were ethical concerns like, you're a journalist. Why did you, serve as a middleman and doing this? There was a ethical concerns, but I was, you know, had this crazy idea, and then I was taking the risks in the first place.
What take us inside that discussion in your newsroom. I'm really curious, as someone who's dealt with when you do undercover, when not, what your newsroom's guidelines were. Did you use your real name?
Mm,
How,
yeah.
what how did that discussion come around where you decided, going undercover, or were you act first, ask permission later mode, which sometimes happens as well.
Yeah. Well, obviously ask permission later, because I I have no idea the result, the outcome, out of my action. Um, and also, I have to be very cautious about, you know, being a reporter and doing undercover reporting. But I did it anyway and had this chat with Dee and, included into the story. And she thought, oh, okay, it worked well. So problem solved. But but I had thought that if I, talked to her early on to get her approval and permission, it may not ended up in the way. And so I guess that's, sometimes I needed to be a little bit crazier. But yes, but at the same time, I know the boundaries of, of being a journalist.
Yeah.
Like, if the outcome was not intended. So if I didn't find out something, I just, won't use it at all.
Sure. That'll be the subject of a future webinar on going undercover.
Yeah, I would
Um,
learn a lot from others, I think.
I bet.
Mhm.
I just want to encourage people to ask questions. I have two more questions.
Mhm.
One is, in the end, what was the reaction of your sources? And do you know if the people inside China were actually able to read your stories?
Yeah, so my source says, I think many of my sources included in the story were, I mean, all, I talked to all and sent all the story links to them, after, the story was out. And I think most of them were very happy, were very pleased about what I got. And some of them were, I think, a small amount of them, um, um, was asking why I was doing this kind of reporting to ruin the reputation of 100-year-old brand in Wisconsin. What was my intention at all? So yeah, so I think most of them were pretty happy, and also shocked. Uh, a small amount of them, which was asking, was question my intention.
Right. And so what are you working on now? You did one investigation. Have you learned your lesson? You want to do more, or you want to take a break? But what are you working on now?
Yeah, I hope I can, working on more projects, investigative in nature moving forward. So I'm working as a freelancer with Wisconsin Watch right now. So I'm desperately need a full-time job. If anyone who are open to hire recruitment, just feel free to let me know. I would love to get a full-time job. But I think that my automatic goal is, be able to do more investigative reporting, and also um, for the marginalized communities and Asian Americans. I've done the stories for the Hmong community in Wisconsin. So I hope in the future that if I've got the opportunities, I could do more for the communities.
And as soon as Milwaukee Glove is willing to talk to you, you'll have a follow-up.
Yeah, so I hope they will eventually answer my questions, specific ones. Yeah,
I hear you.
that's a
Right.
goal.
Well, I really want to thank you for being our inaugural webinarian.
I
I'm
feel
going to
honored.
screen one more time to just give all the participants a few of those links. So let me just share one more time, and gonna go. So again, you guys will all receive an email from FIJ sometime next week with a link to this webinar. You can share it out, be posted on the website, and also Jen's tip sheet. The next deadline for applying for regular grants, these are grants that are up to $10,000, is next Monday, April 29th, midnight. So I know how journalists love to work on deadline. The next deadline to apply for seed grants, these are grants for early reporting. It's that reporting to know if you actually have a story. So we give up to $2,500, and that is May 10th at midnight. We'll be making decisions about both of those applications in mid-June. So that's kind of our timing. You can find details for applications, on our website. I've listed it here. If you have any questions about anything, just grants@fij.org. There's resources on our website. There's a video. There is an FAQ to help answer questions. And then our next webinar is Friday, May 31st at noon, and we're going to be talking to Rebecca Claren. She essentially investigated how her family ended up taking land from indigenous communities, and she traces her whole family's history. And
Wow.
it's also a webinar that will focus on, like, when do you know you have a book? Because her investigation turned into a book called The Cost of Free Land, which I just finished.
Wow.
Is really amazing.
Mm.
So, Jen, I want to thank you again. And I want to thank everybody who was able to participate. And we are done. So have a great weekend, everybody. Take
Thanks
good
for
care.
having me. Thank you so much.
Of course. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.